Hello, I'm the Dark Master, and welcome back to the Kirby Right Back at Ya Retrospective. This time we shall be covering Episode 14, The Pillowcase, or as it's called in the Japanese original release, Face of the Dream Pillow Monster! Before we start, you should know that in the English dub, this was released as the 14th episode and was released on October 26th, 2002, in comparison to the Japanese original, which was released on January 5th, 2002. Another consequence of the differences in Japanese and American New Year's. Now, let's start with the plot. Before we do, there's a major plot change that I need to talk about right from the start. In the Japanese original, the entire plot takes place on New Year. The English dub removes this fact in its entirety, and thus acts like it's any other normal day. This is because the previous episode was the New Year celebration for Kirby, and due to this episode airing during October, obviously the New Year special was delayed, and the connection would have been pretty weak and nonsensical, and pretty much worthless. So it makes sense that they would do this. However, I will say, if they had managed to time the English release correctly, they wouldn't have had to work around this. So it's really, at the end of the day, Foxbox's fault. The episode opens to King Deity and Escargoon riding the king's throne as it heads down the dark tunnel back to the throne room, where Escargoon and Deity discuss how enemy is unfair to the king. Escargoon points out the king's rather bad track record of paying his late fees, and that enemy still sends him the monsters he orders, which is a reasonable statement as, even with an evil corporation like this, if you don't pay them well, you can't really expect the best service, or any service really. The king, however, ignores this sage advice and says that he's their best customer and deserves more. Which, I mean, considering we only see the king buying stuff, we can really only assume he's their only customer, and he goes to call the enemy sales guy. Interestingly, in the Japanese original, the enemy sales guy is wearing this orange New Year Japanese komodo and gives the king a Happy New Year. Sadly, the English dub removed this and in its place put some generic animation of him talking. Quite the shame, but I guess it was needed because they couldn't be sure whether or not this episode would in fact air after the New Year, so yeah. In either version, the enemy sales guy congratulates the king, but the agitated monarch responds by demanding some better treatment. The enemy sales guy is a bit confused by what he means, and the king explains.
You can show a little respect for me.
I'm not sure I'm catching your drift there, Big D.
Well, catch this. I'm through being treated like a second-class customer. Do me right or I'm taking my business elsewhere.
There's also this cut scene in the Japanese original where Escargoon claps and praises the enemy sales guy and gets hit in the head by DDD for doing so. This was removed, likely to keep consistency, as the scene did reference the original plot of the episode and couldn't easily have been edited to make more sense. Also, the overall scene where the king and Escargoon are heading to the throne room via the dark tunnel is shortened by a few scenes, perhaps to better fit within the time schedule. The enemy sales guy changes his tune rather rapidly and apologizes profusely, offers the king some complimentary gifts. The king agrees to it and turns on the monster transport unit. It then appears that these complimentary gifts are pillows sent via the power of reused animation. Woo! Trust me, the problem of reused animation is really strong in this episode. In the English dub, the pillowcases are referred to as pillowcases, whereas in the Japanese original, they are called pillow pads. This was changed likely due to cultural differences, and to be honest, it does make more sense. Apparently, only in Japan are they referred to as pillow pads, not pillowcases. It's kind of odd. After some reused teleportation animation, the king asks, "What are they for?" To which the enemy sales guy performs perhaps the best comeback in anime history.
Pillows? What are they for?
Haven't you ever used one? They're for sleeping.
The enemy sales guy then explains the nature of these pillows. Apparently, these pillows cause nightmares that are extremely bad, and are specifically about Kirby, that the citizens of Capitan will run the pink puffball out of town, making sure to explain it to the slow-minded
What a
king,
dream!
who then laughs manically. After the intro, we then cut to Kirby's house. Hearing a wretched violin sound, we then hear the horrid bird Takori complaining that Kirby, who I remind you is a literal baby, is sleeping in. Gosh, just move out if you don't like it, you wretched bird. Also, he complains about Kirby not doing any chores, which we've already explained is dumb because, again, Kirby is a baby and you can't really expect a baby to do chores, you terrible bird. He then goes to watch TV as we cut to behind the scenes with some more reused animation repurposed from Unreality TV, with channel DDD literally using the same footage of DDD and the puppet Kirby to try and sell the pillows. I'll give the king this much. He can easily do puppetry. Shame he always uses the same method to do so. Tiff walks in on her parents and asks why they're watching Channel DDD, considering its wretched propaganda, to which her parents explains that it's the only thing on TV. Darn that royal-based monopoly. Her parents ignore her wise advice as the commercial continues, as we see some new footage where Escargoon walks on stage with the pillows, and DDD praises them. In the Japanese original, the king says copying their services for these pillows is illegal under certain civil laws, whereas in the English dub, he just says the purchasers will be glad they bought the pillows, which makes far more sense and is a far more advertising, convincing statement. The Japanese version just seems like it's kind of, the term would be technical and not in a good way. In the Japanese original, the pillows are called Healthy Dream Pillows. This is changed in the English dub to Sweet Dream Pillows. Both names are finely ironic. Back to the plot, we see many townsfolk are really watching the TV. DDD pushes Escargoon out of the way and maniacally laughs, but that doesn't set off any alarm bells except for Tiff. Also, just look at Escargoon's face here. It's the perfect meme. Just look at this. Tuff expressing amusement at the idea, with his father saying everyone should go get one, with Ladylike even saying it would help with her beauty sleep, much to Tiff's annoyance. They really should be more skeptical, but I guess if they were skeptical, this episode's plot wouldn't really work. We cut back to that malcontentious bird, Takori, yelling at Kirby to get him a pillow before deciding to go get one himself. Perhaps it would have spent more time if, he had just gotten it himself and not bothered Kirby, but Decory is a terrible bird, so. Okay, so then we see more recycled footage. And can I just ask, why the heck would you use footage of you stopping on Kirby to sell pillows? Firstly, it's unneeded. Secondly, it really exposes your ill intentions to anyone who knows about how you really are. But to go to another point, how brain dead do you have to fall for this? The only one who even questioned this commercial was Tiff, who, by the way, is peer pressured by her own parents to give the product a shot. Man, peer pressure is terrible. These people almost deserve to be ruled by an incompetent moron like DDD. Also, does nobody remember the king's previous escapades in propaganda? That he literally used Channel DDD to brainwash people? Back to the plot. Tiff barges into Meta Knight's room with even more reused footage. But it goes further because Meta Knight uses the same logic to say Tiff should give the king a chance, as he might be turning over a new leaf. This scene is almost identical to a similar scene with Tiff and Meta Knight in Unreality TV, which I remind you this footage is from, so they're literally reusing footage in a way that effectively promotes the same thing. It's weird. Tiff is still suspicious, but decides to listen to Meta Knight, apparently unaware that she could have always just not used the pillow. We then cut to Tiff sleeping alongside Tuff, Sir Ebram, Ladylike, Meta Knight, Blade Knight, and the various citizens of Cappytown. The English dub adds snoring sound effects to when everyone is sleeping in 4Kids. Now that's good. What isn't so great is how they added flatulent sounds to Professor Curio. We could have gone without old man sleep farts. It really is kind of gross. We then see the horrid bird Decory offer Kirby the pillow, but since Kirby is in too deep a sleep to awake, Decory falls asleep, and we cut to the king and Escargoon. DDD wonders if the pillows even works. Escargoon comments that nothing from enemy work, which is kind of unfair. I mean, they send monsters. It's just that they are defeated by Kirby, because he's powerful. DDD orders Escargoon to try the sleeping on the pillows. Escargoon's response changes between versions. In the Japanese original, he laments that he knew he'd be a guinea pig for the king, which, Snaily, you could have ignored this if you had left beforehand. In the English dub, he hopes the pillows are hypoallergenic. Escargoon apparently has asthma, which I can understand. My brother has that. Escargoon falls asleep incredibly fast, leading to the king making somewhat questionable remarks. The Japanese original, the king muses creepily on how comfortable it must be, whereas in the English dub, he says he thought bad people don't sleep well. Which makes no sense. I mean, tons of terrible people sleep. Just because you're a bad person doesn't mean you can't sleep. Then the king does something really stupid and decides to try the pillow himself. Okay, 4 things. 1. The enemy sales guy told you what these things can do. Even if you don't trust him, you should probably be averse to actually trying the pillows. 2. Didn't you want Escargoon to test them out? Maybe you should, wait until he wakes up to ask him what the pillow does, and if the pillow in fact actually gives people nightmares about Kirby. Thirdly, your CGI model is terrible. It looks like you're still standing up, and that they just changed Escargoon and the background. Who sleeps like this? Nosferatu? Fourthly and finally, this really will come to bite him later, especially if he hadn't been brainwashed. He could have easily gotten rid of Kirby, but that really spoils the entire episode, so let's talk about that more in a bit. We then cut to the sales guy talking to his boss, Nightmare, with more reused footage, this time from the very first episode. And it really seems like padding more than anything else because Nightmare only has vaguely more to do with this episode than the average monster of the week. And that's because of the nature of the products. I will say, Nightmare's voice is better in the English dub for as little as we hear of it, and he does seem more confident than in the first episode, so there is some improvement. Tiff appears to be having nightmares about Octagon eating sheep via reused animation and awakes in shock. Tuff then runs in and explains to his sister that he had a similar nightmare, which makes Tiff a little suspicious. But before she can really think about it, Tuff gets in her bed and decides to sleep with her, as siblings do, I guess. Tiff tries to stay awake, but gradually falls back asleep. More reused animation from the first episode is shown, as Kaboo talks and Kirby arrives back. We then cut to her parents, who are also having a nightmare. Okay, so I want to explain that for the most part. I've been comparatively brief on the various nightmares, and that's simply because they're all reused animation on episodes I've already done extensive, in some cases, over 40-minute long videos on. And as such, I don't want to be repetitive and boring to you guys, and it will just serve as padding it in and of itself for the review, and I just don't want to do that. However, there are 3 exceptions, and we'll cover those. The first being right here. In the Japanese version, they dream about Tiff and Tuff running away from Octagon's tentacles, and the dream ends when the 2 tentacles catch up and stretch across the scene before it attacks their kids. In the English dub, this is changed. Interestingly, King Dedede and Escargoon were edited in to run past the kids, and the scene was extended so that it showed them being blocked off by Octagon's tentacles, and the dream instead ends with the baby octopus monsters being spawned by Octagon. Overall, it's only a slight difference, but it is the most in regards to the English dub. Cerebrum awakes in shock, as does his wife, and comments about the nightmare, and says it's lucky Kirby saved them. Ladylike is, however, more cynical, saying they didn't have monsters troubles until Kirby arrived, which is simply not true at all. I mean, firstly, there was Octagon, who was there before Kirby arrived, and Kirby was drawn to Popstar because of that presence of monsters. And thirdly, King Dedede has been the one who's been producing the monsters and getting them. So really, you should blame King Dedede more than Kirby, but this is probably a fundamental nature of the products that King Dedede sold them. But still, Ladylike is not under full control, so it's really just her being an idiot. In the Japanese original, she says more monsters have appeared here since Kirby's arrival, which is more accurate, but still kinda ahistorical and blaming the victim. We then see Kawasaki having more reused footage-based nightmares. However, this kinda weird because in the nightmare, Kawasaki can clearly see Kirby is tripped by King Dedede, but still blames the pink puffball. Wouldn't, cutting that specific scene have made the nightmare more logical? Because if I were to see that as Kawasaki, I would have blamed the king and not Kirby. But I don't know, it's probably just his interpretation, and really this footage is probably not exactly the nightmare they see. The final cutscene of the episode occurs Percy, Williams, and Buttercup's nightmare, which was about the cutscene from Blockbuster Battle, the one where Kirby is shooting a rapid-fire police gun. I don't support censorship, but that does make sense considering that scene itself was cut from the episode. But I don't know, as a gun owner, this scene wasn't that bad. It was played for comedic effect and wasn't really depicting gun violence as a positive. At least this time we don't see Tokori, so the pair would have reason to blame Kirby and not some other factor, like in the Kawasaki dream where, We then see the mayor and his wife have another reused animation nightmare. We then return to Tiff, who has another nightmare, where Meta Knight re-explains all about the past. This, above all others, is a nightmare that is the most feeling like filler in the episode. It really isn't all that scary, and is little more than literally retelling Kirby's past and the past of the Dream Warriors and all about Nightmare. It is the most fragrant use of reused animation. Tiff then awakens and with glowing green eyes ominously says, "Must destroy Kirby." It's actually kind of creepy, so here's a clip of it so for you to see.
We must destroy Kirby. Must destroy Kirby. Destroy Kirby.
Luckily, either because of her strong willpower or her specific meta nightmare being more weak than others, she breaks free from the conditioning. She turns to wake up her brother, who is temporarily under the influence, but she breaks him out of it. It appears that the victims are in some sort of trance-like state, because when he's cut out of the trance, Tuff asks his sister why she woke him up. She then explains that the pillows are messing with people's heads. The Japanese original has her say that the pillows bring back and alter memories to make them bad. This does sort of help explain away the rampant reuse of animation as opposed to brand new nightmares, but it does seem sort of like a cop-out written after the fact. Plus, the English dub completely lacks even this explanation, saying simply that the pillows cause nightmares. So it's really not even worth acknowledging except in the loosest sense, because it's completely removed from the English dub, so that is a weakness that the English dub has. Meta Knight then enters the room and confirms Tiff's statements, saying that everyone who slept on the pillows is out to destroy Kirby. Now, why exactly he didn't try to stop them, instead went to Tiff to tell her, is not known. It seems kind of ill-advised. Also, it's a missed opportunity that we never see Meta Knight's nightmares, but this is probably because Meta Knight's nightmares would have been extremely graphic considering the battles he's had with Nightmare, and also just the fact that they couldn't simply reuse animation. They would have had to make completely new animation, and that would have been too much for this episode. We then cut to Kirby's house, which is surrounded by the green-eyed ghouls. Right before they can do anything, however, Tiff, Tuff, Meta Knight, Blade Knight, Sword Knight arrive to expose the real source of everyone's fears. So yeah, this is the monster of the episode, Noddy, called Nodai in Japan. This monster appeared all the way back in Kirby's original Kirby's Adventure, appearing in multiple colors like green, purple, and red. The ones in the anime are pale peach, with a red nightcap. Overall, the CGI is fine if a bit stilted on these guys. And they don't speak at all, so there's nothing to speak upon when it comes to their voice performance. They're also pretty accurate to the games, because in the games they literally just walk a few steps, fall asleep, and then repeat that pattern ad nauseum. So the fact that they do absolutely nothing in regards to the episode, like they don't even attack Kirby, does make sense. Meta Knight explains that these are naughty, and that they cause nightmares.
Here, no shit, Sherlock.
The people give up their pillows, though Dee and Esquigoon are reluctant at first. Esquigoon gives his up first, and Meta Knight just slashes the kings as we see the naughties pop out, implying also that there was literally nothing except the naughty in those pillows. I mean, look at that. It's kind of odd, because wouldn't that result in a very lumpy pillow if there's literally nothing but the naughty in there? It just seems weird that they're shaped like regular pillows, but there's literally just this ball of fat in the middle. Wouldn't it be very clumpy and hard to sleep on? I don't know. There should have been some more fluffing in there, is all I'm saying. The Naughties clump together for a bit, but then proceed to run off into the woods. Man, you guys just screwed over the environment. Now they're gonna spread like kudzu.
I'm glad those little bed bugs are gone.
Chief, trust me, they may be gone for now, but soon they'll be everywhere. I should know, I'm from the south. I've seen kudzu everywhere, not to mention cane toads of Australia. Tiff wonders where Kirby is, but unluckily the golden midget bird Tikori explains that the pink puffball was sleeping the entire time on a regular pillow. Also, apparently, Tikori is somewhat resistant to naughty-based effects because he doesn't try and destroy Kirby, even though he had ample opportunity to. Which is quite interesting. Just means there's one less way to get rid of the stupid bird, but that's kind of depressing. Everyone looks over Kirby. Everyone's happy except DDD and Escargoon, who complain about their really poor luck. But in a final act of aggression, the king picks up the still sleeping Kirby and puts him on one of the naughty pillows. Strangely, nobody seems to stop him. Apparently, they just want to go along with it. Kirby then begins to have a nightmare, more of him being attacked by various foes and monsters. Interestingly, there's a deleted scene from episode 3 where Meta Knight hits Kirby that is used in this nightmare sequence. It seems kind of odd that they would include that deleted scene, but not the one with guns, but I guess getting slapped is a little better than getting shot at. After a bit, Kirby, scared, awakens and runs out of the house, terrified of the nightmare. Turning around, he sees everyone is laughing at his expense. Meta Knight slices the pillow and foolishly releases another invasive naughty into the environment. Man, Meta Knight, you really don't care about the local environment. Kirby is angry for a moment, but eventually gets over it, and the episode ends with him joyfully jumping in the air. Now let's go over the positives, negatives, and my final thoughts. In terms of positives, I thought Naughty was interestingly used and pretty consistent with the games. Instead of directly fighting, they're used more as objects or animals. No doubt they've pulled a cane toad, and this will explain their existence in the games as they are very common. And they will, in fact, return to face Kirby in the future. The idea of episode's overall plot is also pretty interesting. One of the few times that enemy uses, well, nightmares in a significant manner to try and get rid of Kirby. However, now we already have to dive into the negatives, as there are quite a few, even if I do in general like this episode. Firstly, Tikori is in this episode in a speaking role, which always brings down an episode. More serious is how filled with reused animation this episode is. Out of 20 minutes, in the English dub, 7 minutes and 22 seconds are of reused footage. That is 38% of the episode, which may not seem like much, but it is the highest percentage of reused footage in the entire show. Keep in mind, I may be off a few seconds, and this obviously doesn't count the intro or the credits, but I'm pretty confident that only episode 64 rivals this, and even then it's a distant second. So if you're one of those who hates reused animation and prefers high quality animation, you should completely avoid this episode, and I cannot recommend it at all to you if that's your perspective. Also, just gonna say it, but everyone in this episode except Tiff is a blathering idiot. The citizens fall for a literal reused instance of TV-based propaganda. DDD himself sleeps on a pillow despite knowing full well that they are dangerous, even if he doesn't fully trust enemy. I mean, seriously, the sales guy told you this, moron. Also, let's just really think about these anti-Kirby nightmares. For a guy called Nightmare, his nightmares really are lazy, and in the case of Kawasaki, it really shouldn't even work because he can clearly see that the king is behind Kirby's mess-ups, except in the case of the lightning. Also, I just think the reused animation of previous episode was lazy. It would have been far more interesting if the Naughty actually made completely new nightmares. Though, I do think it makes slight sense that they would be only repurposing old memories. Maybe they're not as strong as Nightmare himself, but it really does seem like they could have done more with that. So in conclusion, how is this episode? Well, the idea is interesting, and I like the Naughty, even if they're probably going to have havoc upon the local ecosystem. And by the way, I'm not joking. We do see at least one breeding population in a future episode, but we'll get there. Overall, this episode is one of the weaker ones, and you can only really enjoy it if you've seen the previous episodes, but you can also notice all the flaws in this. So it's really a mixed bag. You'll most enjoy this if you've seen previous episodes, but if you see those previous episodes, you'll notice all the reused photos and animation. Watch it if you're interested. Interestingly, in the Japanese original, there's even footage from Happy New Year, but that was obviously removed due to the time of release. I can't really suggest this episode unless you're already into the anime, but I do like it. It is one of the episodes that I remember, at least partially, from the original release. That's about it. I'm the Dark Master, and join me next time on the Kirby Right Back at Ya Retrospective. Have a nice day.